Hey guys, I'm going to be on audio only, so you'll have to move the slides.
Behind every great result, there's a story of innovation and collaboration.
There's a lot more collaboration between our customer and us, and it's because we can share data.
Our Prophecy software customers aren't just clients, they're partners in progress. For more than 20 years, we've worked with you to accelerate the digital revolution and drive real results within your industrial operations.
The software takes production data and use to make sure that machines, operators, and managers are able to make the right decisions at the right time.
Prophecy isn't just a tool, it's the engine driving your success forward, and the solution enabling your enterprise to decrease costs, increase profits, reduce waste, improve efficiency, and much more.
The data's in the Prophecy system.
But it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people. Together, we empower teams, accelerate innovation, and drive toward a future that's brighter, more sustainable, and more profitable than ever before. We invite you to experience the power of smart and sustainable operations with Prophecy from GE Vernova.
Hey, good morning. My name is Paul Adams. I'm the director of the Solution Provider Program based in the Americas. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second webinar of the Tech Talk series, Avoiding Risk, Why Cybersecurity is Important Now More Than Ever.
Age manufacturing for cyber attacks that can disrupt operations, data, and impact their bottom important for preventing cybersecurity threats, and it's crucial. So just if we can move, let me see if I can move there. Housekeeping items before we get started, I'd like to go over. Slide yet? There we go. So if you look at this, we have the orange chat bubble. We can submit your questions throughout the session. We'll try to get to all of them if we can. If we can't, contact myself for more information on our Solution Provider Program. So please reach out to me with your feedback. Would love to be with more of the SIs. The blue paperclip icon you can use the orange question mark you can access by refreshing your browser, which is something I had to do already this morning. So and finally, and we will send the recording and the slides as well. a
your audio's not
time preeminent expert.
Can you switch to your phone, or I can take over?
Yeah, take it away, Chad.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, we're. Okay. Hey everyone. Sorry about the audio issues. Hopefully you caught enough of that, or you can see on the slide here that what the different parts of the webinar will do. So let us know if you have any questions in the chat. But yeah, so I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. I'm Chad Smith. I'm the product manager for our Simplicity product, but I work closely together with our product management team and cover the Prophecy portfolio. I'm happy to kind of talk to you today about cybersecurity. So I'll just get started on that. Hit the next button here. Okay, so yeah, here's our agenda. Today we're going to go over some of the challenges that we face in manufacturing and in our work when it comes to cybersecurity. We'll talk about how to secure your systems, your manufacturing systems, how we can help you with that, and then we'll have time for Q&A. And as I think you can see on the overview slide, you can go ahead and put questions in the chat at any time, and at the end we'll go through those. So I'll just go to the next slide here. So you're probably aware that cyber attacks are prevalent in the world today. This slide just kind of gives a bit, some surveys that have shown where we see the percentage of cyber attacks in different industries. This was done in 2023. So you can see manufacturing is the top attacked area from a cyber attack landscape. Even just this morning, I opened up my email and the very first newsletter, listed suspected 4chan hack could expose long-time anonymous admins. So it's very prevalent. We see it more and more. It's something that definitely has to be top of mind as we design our systems to be protect them, especially in the manufacturing environment where we run critical infrastructure, and it has important consequences when things are attacked. So from that perspective, this is some of the top kind of challenges that our customers are facing when it comes to cybersecurity and attacks. All the way from malicious, direct attacks to just things that can happen through human error. Our customers are having to think about it not just from an attack perspective, but also just from reacting to regulatory pressure to implement standards and spend time and money to comply. So the whole spectrum of areas that need to be thought of and taken into consideration as you systems out there. So I'll just kind of let you scan through that. There's a number of different challenges that are being faced today, and that's why we're talking about it. And that's why we want to walk through some of these things that we can do, and that we can help you with in securing your implementations and implementations of our software in our customer environments. So I've mentioned critical infrastructure. Water, wastewater is an example of that. This is a critical infrastructure, and various, to the point that various government and organizations have put together standards to help secure that critical infrastructure, from CISA in the United States to NIST, and then other European initiatives that are being implemented and discussed and actually enforced in some cases to make sure that we protect our critical infrastructure. Let's talk a bit about securing the systems that we deploy our software into. So, security is always a balancing act. The more secure something is, often it's harder to set up and use. On the other hand, the less secure it is, or the more easy it is to use and make available, the less secure it can be. So, there's this model called the CIA model, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems and data. And typically, from an IT perspective, the most focused on area is typically confidentiality, making sure that only those people that need to see information can see information. And then, to the lower priority of, making sure anybody that wants or needs to get information can get to it. So the focus in IT is generally on confidentiality, followed by integrity, then availability. Whereas often in OT systems, it's almost the reverse, where it's really important that the availability of the system is, that the right people can get to the right data at the right time to make sure that they, the system is running well, that there's visibility into, what's going on. Not to say that, these other pieces aren't important, but there's just a balancing act that has to be considered as you implement the IT and OT systems, as part of implementing solutions for our customers. And so there's no one right answer. It really is one of those things where you have to kind of take a look at the situation, take a look at what you're trying to manufacture or monitor, and make sure that the right balance is being struck between availability, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So these are some of the things that you can do to kind of bolster the defense against cyber attacks. So it really comes down to being aware, really, and being intentional about it. So you can do this by starting, to just be on watch for alerts or advisories of, vulnerabilities or updates that may be available and may be needed to be applied to the system as, vulnerabilities are encountered or attacks happen. Typically when an attack happens, there's a response and fixes offered, and often in the form of patches to software or to common components or to open source components. And if you're not aware of those and watching for those, you may be vulnerable without even realizing it. So, there's lots of resources, like we mentioned with the CISA, websites and publications to kind of explore. So the next recommendation is really to explore those resources and understand kind of the recommendations and the standards being implemented, so that you can apply them to the situations that you're helping to solve with your customers. So, as you become aware or stay aware of what's happening on the cybersecurity landscape, that allows you to then organize yourselves or help your customers organize themselves to be, monitoring for these things, which, may involve designating representatives or cross-team representatives to make sure that there's awareness and training happening and implementations happening in your systems to be aware of and secure your data, your software, et cetera, which then, requires you to think about, how do we plan for that? Do we need to create an incident response plan? If something happens, how do we react to it? Are you regularly monitoring the network and the system that's implemented and using tools to watch for, who's accessing the system and where, what is the state of your devices across the network? Are they online? Are they being flooded? Are there any attacks happening? So there's tools out there, like showdown monitoring tools, and just so it really just requires, intentionality and planning in the current landscape to be aware of these things and to put put things in place, plans in place to be aware of and to respond to any threats that may happen. And then as part of that, we would, I remember growing up, you would in school you would have your fire drills, right? And that's so that when something does happen, it's not the first time you've run through and tried to figure out what to do. So simulating, running drills, simulating what could happen and measuring how you're responding to it and making adjustments so that you are ready when a real-time event may happen. And then, out of all of that work, you can then start to plan and minimize the attack surface that is available, whether that's through consolidating and having consolidating your system, working together with your IT team, and just looking to secure, firm up the parts of your system that are not strong enough based on those simulations and on that planning and those investigations. All of these steps can help you to kind of help, in the systems that you implement and in the customers you work with to help to create a strong defense against cyber attacks. So, so there's this concept of zero trust, which it's an interesting concept where, zero trust doesn't sound very great, but when it comes to protecting critical infrastructure or critical systems, you need to really start at a place of zero trust and then only move towards trust in when it makes sense and in the right way. So one of the interesting ways to maybe think about this as a system is in terms of like a medieval castle and protecting against attacks. So for example, on the right-hand side there, when you think about identity, those that are accessing the system, if they approach the castle, are they who they say they are? Are they a citizen of the realm or someone trying to sneak in, right? How have you make sure that they haven't stolen somebody's credentials and are coming in under false pretenses? So identity and who's accessing the system and if they're allowed to come in is important, which kind of leads to the next part of the equation, which is what can someone entering the castle do? What someone who is logging into the system, what are they allowed to do? Are they only allowed to do the things that they have permission to do? Do they have a room? Do they have a key to their room in the inn, or have you inadvertently given them, keys to the armory or the vault? So, just different ways to think about it. So, and then session management. This is, have they stayed longer than they should have stayed? Are they, when I go and, I live in Canada, when I go to the US and I cross the border, they ask, how long are you going to stay? And if I stay longer than that, that could be flagged, right? So, in terms of session management, are they, are we making sure that sessions are being, aren't staying up longer than they need to, especially if they can be accessed by anyone walking down the hall. The administrator, is that, you need to be sparing and careful about who has administrative access, and has that, and does that need to be, changed or updated in terms of passwords? Does that, you want to make sure that some trusted guard at the castle hasn't been bribed and is now a bad actor. Client connections, are people only entering by the drawbridge, or is somebody tunneling underneath the wall, right? Being aware of and restricting who can access the system and monitoring who's accessing the system can be a key part of the zero trust equation. Service to service connections, even once inside, is something going on that shouldn't be happening? Is the knight flirting with the queen behind the king's back, so to speak? Right? Like there's still, even within the system and the software that you implement in the system, are you ensuring that the right levels of trust are being set up? Delivery of the installer, this is kind of like the Trojan horse. Like as we deliver software and install software, as we download software, are we making sure that it's, software, it's the software we think it is? and it's not something that's been snuck in either through human delivery or through the network. And speaking of the network, that's a critical kind of gateway that needs to be monitored and controlled of who, many systems are air gapped, right? They don't have access to the internet. There's a reason for that. Are we making sure that we're securing that? And finally, the software itself, like the brick and mortar, are they kind of like the castle? There's make sure that it's not crumbling on the inside, or the lumber isn't rotting. Like keeping the software up to date. Having really old versions of software means they probably are missing some critical patches and critical security capabilities that have been added to the software in response to vulnerabilities that have been found. If we're not running software that is up to date and able to handle these kinds of attacks, then you're at risk, right? So that's kind of the zero trust concept. And our SCADA solutions have a lot of features that allow you to kind of guard against these and make sure that you're following those patterns that keep things safe. So for example, like I mentioned, on a regular basis, we update our software with the latest, not only with new features and not only with bug fixes, but also patches for open source software that our software may use, or even patches for any vulnerabilities found, with our software. So keeping up to date is a key part of that. The authentication provider that you use has, is it up to date? Does it allow for modern implementations of authentication? So for example, our proxy authentication software, or component of our portfolio, allows you to do multi-factor authentication and manage those identities and those user permissions and the access, who has access, and passwords, and all those kinds of things are the latest. The proxy authentication software is where we're updating to the latest technologies and capabilities when it comes to authentication. So incorporating that into your solutions can be a great way to keep things secure. Just monitoring and making sure the user permissions that are granted to different users, the software allows you to do that, whether in proxy authentication or in the products themselves. You have the ability to designate which users can do which functions in our software as they run the systems. Our software also allows you to, have allowed lists for what clients can connect to the SCADA server, for example, or which projects are allowed to run, or which screens, checking to make sure that screens haven't been tampered with. All of, these are features that our SCADA solutions offer that you can set up to make sure that your system stays secure. Enabling session timeouts and being able to have fallback to lower accessible users, for permanent displays or displays that may be, unmonitored for a while and anybody can access. It's important to kind of keep those in a session state where that makes sense for who's using it and when. Back to the delivery of the installer, like as you bring software into the system and install it, or you can, we digitally sign our software, which allows you to check to make sure that it's delivered by who says that we're delivering it. So you can check and make sure that it's signed by GE, right? And then, of course, just in the communication protocols, more and more the protocols that are being developed in a modern way, like OPC UA, are based on or have built-in security using certificate-based protocols. And so we'll talk more about some of these things, but these are some of the areas that we provide features and capabilities for in our SCADA solutions to help you maintain that zero trust environment and to keep things safe. So this is just a little bit, this is a slide a little bit kind of going over a bit more of what our proxy authentication, formerly called, was called UAA originally. We've changed that name to proxy authentication, but this is really around centralizing and simplifying the authentication management and providing improved security. So what Prophecy Authentication allows you to do is essentially have a single sign-on across all of our Prophecy portfolio, allowing you to manage your users and groups from a single location and enable things like multi-factor authentication. It supports Active Directory and LDAP connections, allowing you to have a nested Active Directory group support, support more than one LDAP server, and having multi-domain support, as well as SAML support, which allows you to do that multi-factor authentication. So this is something that, if you haven't already considered it, is something we would encourage you to look at as you implement systems for our customers. We talked a little bit about OPC UA. OPC UA is, our SCADA solutions leverage OPC UA heavily in terms both of bringing data into the SCADA for management, but as well as exposing data from our SCADA servers through OPC UA servers. And OPC UA is inherently built to be securable through different levels of encryption and through certificate trust requirements, so that only those who are trusted can actually retrieve the data from a SCADA system, for example. And we provide, some tooling and capabilities to allow you to manage that. Like I mentioned, security is one of those things where the more secure you are, sometimes the harder it is to set up and use. And so over the years, we've developed tooling to help manage certificates. One of those capabilities is our global discovery server, which is part of the OPC UA specification for being able to manage and sign certificates and keep them up to date and manage trust lists and things like that. As well as we are, in our Prophecy portfolio, as we're going forward, we have, we continually on our roadmap look for ways to make it easier to manage and essentially manage your certificates and be able to keep them up to date when they expire, be able to make sure that we can have proper trust as the communications are built between our products and our services. So where can we help? As we build the Prophecy portfolio and the products and the capabilities within that portfolio, we follow a rigorous software development lifecycle. And I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that we do as we do that. So, that starts with, as we start to plan for the features that, based on the feedback from yourself and from customers, as we lay out the requirements and the design, through proper, through training of our development organization, and we have regular trainings on, building secure software. As we do the design, we're always thinking about, how is this going to, affect, the security of the system. And that comes down to doing things like threat modeling as we review the design, thinking about the attack vectors that may be being exposed, for example, as we make it easier to use our software by exposing, REST interfaces into configuration or runtime data, that becomes a threat vector. And we have to think about how are we protecting those REST interfaces, making sure that only those who have the right permissions in the system can actually come in through an API and make changes or retrieve data. So that's all part of the planning and the modeling that we do. And then of course, we take advantage of the latest tools for scanning our software, either at rest or in dynamic runtime kind of data transfers, where we have not, we run this on a regular basis as we do development, as well as at the time of release. We work closely with we call them our red team, or our security team, that essentially does a rigorous pass on our release ready software to make sure that and tests of attack vectors and simulates it, attacks to call out and find those areas where it may be vulnerable, so that we can can address those before we actually deploy them out to be used by our customers. So all of these steps allow us to kind of, start from the beginning and build in secure software and secure access to our software as we go forward. So, kind of going on that same theme, it is a high priority for GE Vernova to be able to have this secure process. And so as we do this, we are, certified in a number of certifications that really kind of are kind of a check to see that we're following processes that will create secure products. So those certificates, if you want to go kind of see some of what we have in place there, you can go to our website at gevernova.com/software/cybersecurity. And we kind of go through some of what I just talked about in terms of our process, as well as our certifications, and also what's available both on this site and in our online help for all of our products. We have developed, and we keep up to date on a regular basis, our secure deployment guides, or SDGs as we call them. So if you go to our, for example, if you're to go to the Simplicity Online Help, or iFix, or any of our products, you'll see a link that will allow you to see our secure deployment guide. And this is a guide that walks through, how to harden a system and how to set up our software in a way that's secure, and working together, both with the features and capabilities that are built into the software, as well as, just the system tools that are out there, whether it's securing Windows or IP security setups that allow you to secure your system, and gives you guidance on, what ports you should or shouldn't maybe consider opening, how to, architecture diagrams to be able to see how to, where trust should be, and kind of garden and firewalls should be put in place, and DMZ zones and things like that. All of those are outlined in our SDG, or our secure deployment guides. They're really good resources to allow you to make sure that you're helping our customers to build secure systems. So here's some facts to consider that kind of go along with this whole concept of making sure that you're running systems that are secure. So one of the things to consider is that Microsoft will stop supporting Windows 10 by October 2025. And this, when you continue to run software that goes out of support, you run the risk that you're not getting the latest updates and security patches that will, potentially make those systems a target for hackers. So here's some things, as you think about that, and as you think about the systems that you may be involved in taking care of or implementing, sometimes those moments when operating systems go out of date and you need to think about upgrading, that upgrade process is a great time to think about a number of other factors that, since you're already going to be having to update to newer operating systems or newer hardware, these are some things to think about as you do, go through that process. So that's a great time to think about enhancing the security of your systems. Are you following the secure deployment guide that we outlined, and making sure that as you kind of refactor the system, that you're avoiding obsolescence through updating to the latest software and patches, as well as doing some of those steps to make sure your system is set up securely. It's also a good chance to think about, is there an opportunity to modernize your user experience? As we, if you've been running older versions of our software, now is a good time to take a look at what we offer with our latest versions, from things like Operations Hub that lets you modernize your user experience and make it available anytime, anywhere in browser form, or being able to start to use some of those capabilities to mobilize your application so it can be accessible, from mobile devices. Also thinking about taking it, as we in our modern age, AI and the analytics are a hot topic, and it can be a real enabler for how you either implement systems or how you help your operators or your users to take advantage of the data that they're collecting from their system. So one of the things to be aware of is that in the last release, and now going forward, we offer a free runtime license to our cSense analytic package that allows you to try out and start using the analytics built in and created in our Prophecy portfolio. So be aware that we're trying to make it easier and easier for you to be able to use the tooling and the capabilities to do analytics within the Prophecy portfolio.
Great.
And with that, I'll hand it over to Paul to kind of close us out here. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chad. I hope you can hear me better now.
Yeah, we definitely can.
Okay, fantastic. That was excellent. Thank you so much. I apologize for the audio before, such as the peril of being in a hotel room. So while we wait, please take a look at the orange question mark icon and post your questions. While we wait for questions to come in, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of the resources that are available to the system integrators. So there's a wealth of information available to the SIs. So this slide shows where you can go to roll in the edge to get all the training that is available. There's a lot of free on-demand training available. Also, there are badges for Simplicity, iFix, Operations Hub, Plan Applications, a lot of great stuff there, always new stuff being added, as well as certifications in automation as well as manufacturing. Number two is the Seismic portal for support materials you can take for information to help with sales and marketing. There's a lot of customer stories up there as well that you may find helpful. Number three is the Customer Center, so ensuring that you have access to the Customer Center so you can enter cases against products, you can have access to knowledge base, et cetera. And then finally, the Solution Provider LinkedIn page is available. So, we put out information there on upcoming events, et cetera. So a great way to stay connected. So try to grab that as well. So there is a take action button where you can kind of reach out to us and give us feedback more about the program, et cetera. So please take advantage of that. I also wanted to direct your attention to the pink survey icon. So take some time to fill that out around today's session, as well as what you're hearing from our customers. One other item of note, we are sending out our annual VOC survey to SIs at the end of the month. So look for that in the mail, and it helps us improve the program. So please take a look at that, and we go from there. Okay, so with that, we'll start going through some of the questions, and there's a few here, Chad, so I'll read them out to you, and you can answer. The first one is, if you keep the OT network isolated or air-gapped, is there still a need for the same level of security?
Yeah, I'll take a crack, and I'll let Doug Stewart comment as well. He's one of our security experts on as well, but kind of like that slide I showed about the top security challenges facing customers, right? There's multiple ways for attacks to happen, not just through a network, right? So whether that's a human, one of the people that are working on the plant walking in and inserting their USB key in and pushing something in, or clicking on a malicious email, or it's not just the air gap that provides enough protection. There's always possible ways to get into the system. Doug, I'll let you comment if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, the strongest security systems are always multi-layered, as Chad mentioned, there are other levels of security risk other than those coming in from the network. And, nowadays, a lot of modern networks, they do have, DMZs and air gaps, but there's always, for need of being able to apply updates and allow remote access, there's always some way through in many systems. And, it's very important to have multiple layers of security that can help prevent, the spread of any kind of security infiltration that has occurred through some hole in your air gap or some other, mechanism, like somebody bringing a laptop into the corporate network, into the OT network, and, introducing something that way. So multi-layer security is the best approach.
Very good. Okay, great. Another question. I noticed when we started working with Configuration Hub that we require certificates which are difficult to configure. Are these required?
Yeah, again, I'll take a first crack and then hand it over to Doug. But ultimately, when you're talking from machine to machine, there is that need to have that level of trust and the modern TLS way of communicating between machines and across networks does use certificates. I think I would agree that often they can be difficult to use. Our documentation has detailed instructions on how to do that, and more we're looking to provide tooling, like I mentioned before, in our to be able to manage those certificates and be able to have a visibility into when they're going to expire, to be able to update them easily. So definitely a valid point. I'll let Doug make any comments there.
Yeah, some of the difficulty with managing certificates is, a lot of times when we're deploying our software, we're using self-signed certificates a lot. So they all have, it's a lot of point-to-point trust configuration that is needed to do with a system like that. So some of the better approaches would be to have a central signing certificate, and then all of the clients of connecting to that certificate, and would only need to trust that root signing certificate. And that's some functionality that our global discovery server provides. So you can use the global discovery, the OPCUA global discovery server to manage that root certificate and apply signatures to all of the certificate signing requests to help complete the certificate generation. And that same methodology can be applied to the web server certificates that are used in various places. And that way you're just managing distribution of your root signing certificate, the public key of the root signing certificate to all the clients for them to trust. So there are ways to make it less cumbersome. So it's very important to stay abreast of what are the lifetimes of your certificates, so you can manage to regenerate them and re-trust them, or re-update your central signing certificate if it's expiring. So yeah, there are challenges, but there are ways to make it less challenging also.
Great. Okay, there's one more question. So while I ask this, go to the orange icon if there's any questions. You got a couple more minutes if you have a few left that we want to ask our presenters. Here is the last question in here. You mentioned prophecy authentication. Can I use this to leverage my business SSO, and can I set permissions for the SCADA?
Yeah, good question. I'll take it again, first crack, and let Doug comment. But proxy authentication is set up to be able to have providers behind the authentication service. So you can leverage your business's LDAP permissions and users and groups and tie those into the proxy authentication setup. And then, there is, our SCADAs, for example, Simplicity and iFix are set up to be able to kind of tie together or map the groups from the proxy authentication and the LDAP groups together and tie them to groups at the SCADA level, so that when a user logs in, we know what groups they have permission for, and we can tie those to permissions in the SCADA. So you can set up, SCADA permissions for different parts of accessing the database or changing data. Those permissions get kind of passed through the group mappings that go back all the way to your LDAP setups. But Doug, if there's anything you want to add there.
I think you covered it pretty well. As you're configuring the SCADA system, it publishes what groups it has available, and to proxy authentication, and then you can take your proxy authentication, either your LDAP groups or other groups you configure in proxy authentication to those groups that the SCADA system's configured into proxy authentication. You can do the mapping there inside of proxy authentication. Particularly in the case of Simplicity, where if the roles and resources that you configure in Simplicity end up being published as a group of resources in the role together, and you just map the roles and resources the groups in proxy authentication to those. So you can tailor it to each project specifically.
Great.
That's all I have to add.
That's it? Okay, great. Okay. All right, I'm looking here, and there are currently no other questions. So we'll wrap up. Look for next month's webinar. Tell your friends to come. Like I said, that take action there. You can send feedback on the program. If there's anything you want to do, set up a call with me. That'd be fantastic. Looking forward to talking in the future. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to our presenters, and have a great day.